All right, hello everybody. This is going to be Introduction to MIDI Project 2. So for you, you're going to be expected to create drum and percussion groove for 32 bars and then add a bass line to that groove. And it needs to be a new one. So whatever you did on Project 1 is great, but now we're moving on. We're going to recreate a whole new sequence. So I just want to make sure that you know that you can't reuse anything in the class. For every project, you're going to keep doing new stuff, and then eventually in the end, a whole song. So for the purposes of the video, just to kind of cut to the chase, I am going to do just the opposite. So I'm going to reuse the groove that I did in the Project 1 demo, just to save time, because you don't probably need me to re-explain all that for you. So I'm going to start with that same groove. I've already got 16 bars on the timeline here. So if I zoom out, click there and drag it. This is the little bit that I did for the first demo. So we have drum set, we have percussion, and now we need to add a track for bass. So I'm going to go back to my mixer view here, go to the top and hit track new. And there's a couple of options here. So one way would be to again add a stereo track and put an expand module on it and pick a bass sound, and that's cool. One thing to consider, it's personal preference, I guess, but for me, in the traditional sense, a bass is, a bass is like this. It's a bass guitar. You plug it in or whatever, and it's got a mono output. It's got one jack, goes into an amplifier, and it's just a mono instrument. And often too, when we mix bass, like in terms of audio mixing, we tend to put the bass in the middle of the track because these are pretty low frequencies and they take up a lot of energy. And if you put the bass on one side or the other of an audio mix, maybe it kind of throws the whole thing off in terms of level. So it's pretty common to put the bass right in the middle of a mix, and to record it as a mono track. Doesn't have to be, but it's just something to think about, something to consider, that you might put the bass in the middle of the track and only do it as a mono track. So I think that's what I'm going to do. All right, so the bass is on the floor, safely on the floor. And I'm going to create a mono instrument track in Tix and hit create. So here we go. We're on the other side of our master fader. That's fine. If you want to move it over to the other side, all you got to do is just click on it and drag, and you can reposition that track anywhere that you want to. And hey, something else that you can do, if you would like for it to be a different color, is just go to the very bottom of the track, double click it, and pick any color that you like. So let's go green. All right, this helps us kind of visually see our session, especially when we start to get into lots and lots of tracks. We can have one color for one family of instruments and different colors for others, which is kind of a nice feature. I'm going to name the track bass, and I'm going to plug in an instrument. So we're going to go plug in, instrument, and expand to mono, because the track that I created was a mono instrument track. If you'd like to do a stereo instrument track and use some of the electronic bass sounds that might have some stereo effects in them, cool, no problem. I'm going to go old school. All right, so let's go and look and see. If you go into our folders, there's a folder number 25 that says basses. And I think just for now, finger, meaning you're just playing the bass with your finger. That's pretty simple and straightforward. I think that'll work. All right. Once again, it's MIDI. You want to go back and change the sound later on? You can do it. So I've got a sound going. I've got drums. And now we get to talk about how do you create a bass line? We've got an instrument, we've got a groove. Well, there's two things that you can think about in terms of creating your bass line. And the first one is, what rhythm do you want it to play? So let me go back to the timeline here, and let's just listen to the drums for a second. The kick drum. So a lot of times in a band, the drummer and the bass player try to hook up rhythmically. So whatever the drummer's playing with the kick drum, with the right foot, the bass player might play something that goes along with that. Maybe it won't be exactly the same thing, but it should be kind of together and not sort of fighting with what the drummer plays. So here, the drum, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, So maybe I play a bass line that did something like that. 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So that it kind of fits with what the drummer's playing. And it could be just one note. That would be totally fine. If the chords aren't moving around, you could just use one note. So let's start with just one note and see how it sounds. I'm going to give myself a couple bars to count off. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Cool, it's not like super exciting, but it definitely works. Let's go in and change the height of our track here. Track height, go to large. And I'm going to go from clips to notes. Scroll the piano up. There's a couple things that we can do to try to dress up the bass line a little bit. And in class, we would have talked about things like the pentatonic scale. But even before that, I'm just going to play some octaves, just going from a low to a high. Check it out. Low C, 2, 3, 4. So it's a way to kind of, change the way it sounds, and you're still really just playing one note. So that's pretty simple, right? If we want to take it a step farther, we could add what would be the fifth of that scale. So I'm starting on a C, and if we play all the white notes from C to C, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And every piano teacher in the world is screaming at me right now because my fingering sucks. But that's okay, we won't worry about it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5 note is a good one to land on because it's part of basically every chord. And I can play that same groove I did a minute ago using the 1, the 5, and the 1 on top. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, and 3, and. So now we're starting to add a little bit more flavor to it. It's still pretty simple. It definitely works. It's fitting with the drum set. And we're adding in some other notes that, that just kind of give it a little bit more life and a little bit more sense of shape. Let's check out what we can do with a pentatonic scale. All right, so in class, we should have talked about pentatonic scales, and I probably gave you 2 versions of that. One is a major pentatonic scale, and the other one would be a minor pentatonic scale. And these are great material for all kinds of things, melodies, but especially bass lines. So just to keep it super simple, I'm going to stick with a major scale, which is all the white notes from C to C. And the pentatonic scale in the major is going to be 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. If I come up here, maybe you can hear it a little bit better. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. So I'm going to use that same rhythmic pattern as before. And maybe I'm going to throw in some of these other notes from the major pentatonic scale and see if I can come up with a bass line. Let's check that out. 1, 2, 3, and. Cool. So, it's not like earth-shattering, but it works. Doesn't sound bad. And that's kind of the promise of the pentatonic scale. It's kind of hard to make it sound bad, which is nice, So we can come up with a lot of different combinations of rhythms and notes that will work, but I'm going to stick with that one for now just so I can demonstrate the project. So now that I've got my line in there, I'm going to go ahead and quantize it just to make sure it's lockstep with the drums. Cool. And now I'm going to copy and paste it to the second section of the tune. So I'm going to make a timeline selection. And I want to make sure that it's exactly 8 bars. So I'm going to shift click, look at my length, it says 8 0 0 0 0 0. And then I can just go Command D, and it's going to duplicate that bass line to the second part of the tune. So on project 2, the drums have to change up every 8 bars. The bass line can be the same all the way through, with one exception, which I'm about to show you. We're going to use a function that's called transpose. Let me set up the session and show you how we're going to do it. All right, so if you're looking at the screen, you can see that I've selected the entire first 16 bars. And for the sake of keeping the video as short as I can, I'm going to kind of cheat here, and I'm just going to hit Command D and duplicate the whole thing so that now I have 32 bars of drums and bass. And understanding that you're going to do a much better job than I am of making all the groove changes on the drums and really crafting it to be a really nice drum part. Let me drop a marker here. This is the next section, which would be 17 through 24. And then another marker 8 bars later. So if I change my grid to 1 bar at a time, I can make an 8-bar selection. That puts me right here. Drop another marker. This is going to be bars 25 through 32. And then the last marker is the end of the piece right here. And that's basically the end. So now I can see the whole project in front of me from the beginning to the end. So if you look at the project sheet, it says bass line or vamp must be transposed up or down for measures 17 through 24. What does that mean? Well, what it means is that we're going to take the notes of the bass part and we're going to move them all up or all down so that they're in kind of a different key, if you will. It's a little bit of a transpose or a little bit of a shift. It's pretty easy to do. Let me show you how we do it. So using the selector tool, I'm just going to grab only the bass part. And I'm going to highlight the notes on that section 17 through 24. Not the drums, not the percussion. If we transpose those tracks, they'll actually play different instruments and it'll sound pretty weird. So we're only going to select the bass notes, and then we're going to go to Event and Operations and Transpose. In this window, we can transpose things up or down by octaves or by semitones. So an octave would be like going from here to here or from here to here. And a semitone is going to be a half step on the keyboard. So if you watch my hand, if I go from C to C sharp, that's a semitone. From C sharp to D. So those are half steps or semitones. So what I would like to suggest is that you take your bass line either up or down by no more than, let's say, 4 or 5 semitones. If you go from, let's say, C as your first note up to D as your first note, you would be traveling 1, 2 semitones. Make sense? So if I start on a C with my bass line and I travel 1, 2 semitones, then my new starting point would be on a D. That's up 1 whole step. If I go 3 semitones, I'm going from C to E flat. My whole bass line would go up by a minor third, 3 semitones from C to E flat. So let's try that. Let's just take our bass line and go up 3 semitones. So if we look at the transpose function, I'm going to type in a 3, not a -3, but a +3. And when I hit apply, you should see the bass part go up. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, go. Did you see it move? Let's listen to it. Here we go. Previous section. Now it's just going to move up, different key. Cool. So you can hear that the bass went to a different tonal center. It basically transposed to a different key. You can also hear that we lost our drums. Let's go figure out why. I think I see the problem. When I made my copy and paste, I didn't select the drums. I only selected the percussion and bass. No problem. We just go to our selector tool. We drag out the first 16 bars and Command D. And now we're good to go. All right. So when we get to the end of that section, you're going to hear it go back down to the original key. Here we go, back down. So it's a really easy way to take a performance like a bass line and move it to a different tonal center. But also, eventually, if you're writing songs, you might prepare a song for a singer and they say, you know, that's really not a good key for me. Can you take it up or down like a step? And you could just select all of the melodic or harmonic notes in the sequence and move them up or down. It's really, really easy. So transpose is a great function to learn about.